Highly structured, top-down economic systems rely heavily on predictable inputs. When struck by sudden, real-world friction, they completely shatter. From 1951 to 2017, the Indian economy was engineered by a central authority, the Planning Commission, through 12 distinct 5-year plans. Over 6 decades, the Commission's objective evolved rapidly, shifting from basic agricultural survival to heavy industry and ultimately targeting sustainable digital inclusion. But this 66-year trajectory was not continuous. It was heavily fractured by geopolitical conflicts and severe economic shocks. 3 distinct historical gaps broke the timeline: the plan holidays beginning in 1966, the rolling plan of 1978, and the annual plans triggered in 1990. We are going to chronologically map all 12 plans using this data dashboard. By deconstructing the target versus actual growth, we can isolate exactly where the system succeeded and why it occasionally failed. Understanding the modern Indian economy requires looking closely at these theoretical plans and analyzing the forced system reboots triggered by external crises. The first 5-year plan, running from 1951 to 1956 under Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, was built on the Herod-Domar framework. The immediate priority was agrarian survival and the rehabilitation of refugees following partition. Favorable harvests helped the plan beat its 2.1% growth target, hitting 3.5%. This initial phase required a massive infrastructural push. Mega dam projects like Bakra Nangal, Hirakud, and the Damodar Valley were heavily advanced to secure irrigation and power. The second 5-year plan, from 1956 to 1961, introduced the Mahalanobis model. This was an aggressive strategy that diverted capital toward rapid, domestic heavy industry and steel production to build long-term economic capacity. It successfully created an industrial base, establishing massive steel plants at Bhilai, Rourkela, and Durgapur. However, it fell slightly short of its 4.5% target due to mounting foreign exchange pressures and rising inflation. By 1961, the third plan aimed to elevate India into a self-reliant economy by strengthening agriculture and industry. Instead, it suffered a cataclysmic failure. Against a 5.6% target, actual growth collapsed to 2.8%, the worst miss in Commission history. 2 successive shocks completely broke the plan. Severe droughts devastated agricultural output, and planned resources were massively diverted to defense during the Sino-Indian War of 1962, followed closely by the Indo-Pakistan War of 1965. The third plan proved that meticulously crafted economic models fall entirely apart under the immense resource drain of multiple border conflicts. The severity of that failure forced the state to pause the system. This created the first structural break in the timeline: 3 consecutive annual plan holidays from 1966 to 1969. When the fourth 5-year plan was launched in 1969 under Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, the philosophy shifted towards stability and self-reliance, highlighted by the nationalization of 14 major commercial banks. Despite early gains from the Green Revolution, the fourth plan achieved only 3.2% against a 5.7% target. It was severely weakened by poor monsoons and severe inflation. The system also buckled under massive demographic pressure, as a massive influx of refugees crossed the border during the 1971 Bangladesh War. In response, the fifth 5-year plan, covering 1974 to 1979, adopted a highly concentrated core objective: Garibi Hatao, or poverty removal. Even with the massive cost disruptions of a global oil price shock, the fifth plan overperformed. It achieved a 4.7% actual growth rate against its 4.4% target. But political turbulence cut the success short. The Janata government took power and terminated the fifth plan a full year early in 1978. This abrupt administration change inaugurated the second historical gap, the rolling plan period from 1978 to 1980. The 1970s planning era was defined by volatility, a constant tug-of-war between aggressive domestic poverty programs and massive external demographic and political shocks. The sixth 5-year plan stabilized the system from 1980 to 1985, By promoting technological modernization and launching direct attacks on unemployment, it successfully beat its target, reaching 5.5% growth. The seventh five-year plan, guided by Rajiv Gandhi through 1990, pushed modernization further, expanding telecommunications and computerization across the industrial sector. Plan 7 successfully beat its growth target. But shortly after its conclusion, a massive 1991 balance of payments crisis completely drained India's foreign exchange reserves. This was a sudden, violent halt in national economic liquidity. The severe economic instability forced the third and final historical break in the timeline, the annual plans from 1990 to 1992. For competitive exams, apply the 3-2-2 memory rule to memorize these timeline fractures. The gaps were exactly 3 years from 66 to 69, 2 years from 78 to 80, and 2 years from 90 to 92. In 1992, guided by the new economic policy, the post-liberalization 8th Plan introduced indicative planning. The state stepped back from setting rigid manufacturing quotas and instead focused its resources on human development while facilitating private sector activity. The shift was highly effective. Buoyed by the recent market reforms, the 8th Plan achieved a massive 6.5% actual growth against a 5.6% target. The 1991 crisis ended the era of rigid state monopoly, refocusing the Planning Commission on private sector facilitation and human development. The 9th five-year plan, spanning 1997 to 2002, aimed for growth with social justice and equity. Despite its ambitions, actual growth fell short of the 6.5% target. Domestic planning was disrupted by major external shocks, specifically the Asian financial crisis and heavy international sanctions placed on India following the 1998 nuclear tests. The 10th five-year plan, from 2002 to 2007, sought to correct this by enforcing strict monitorable targets for health and education, and it saw the enactment of the NREGA, Rural Employment Guarantee. This period saw a massive acceleration in the industrial and service sectors. The economy achieved 7.7% growth, just narrowly missing its highly ambitious 8% target. The 11th five-year plan, from 2007 to 2012, focused heavily on faster and more inclusive growth, expanding agricultural output and educational access. India maintained a remarkably high growth rate of around 8%, but the devastating 2008 global financial crisis prevented the plan from reaching its 9% goal. The 12th plan, covering 2012 to 2017, added sustainability to its core inclusion goals. Operating through a final shift in political leadership, it closed out the era with growth settling around 7%. Over these final 4 plans, a clear pattern emerged. Domestic five-year targets became increasingly vulnerable to unpredictable international market forces. Curious, which raises the critical question, why is there no 13th five-year plan? Because on January 1, 2015, the government officially dissolved the Planning Commission entirely, replacing it with a new policy think tank, NITI-IO. The rigid, top-down approach of setting strict macroeconomic quotas every 5 years was no longer compatible with the realities of a fast-moving, rapidly globalizing digital economy. This summary table tracks that complete 66-year architectural shift. We see the evolution from the Herod-Domar focus on agricultural survival to the Mahalanobis heavy industry model, and finally into indicative planning for human development. Make sure to lock in the structural breaks. The 3, 2, and 2-year gaps, driven by wars, political transitions, and the 1991 crisis, are high-frequency testing points for competitive exams. By anchoring your study to this chronological breakdown and analyzing exactly where the plans failed, the complex history of Indian macroeconomics becomes highly predictable. The 5-year plans record the survival and adaptation of a newly independent nation navigating an increasingly volatile global market.